This is Thursday, February the 13th of 2025. We're in council chambers having a meeting tonight, just a budget meeting discussion with the public. We're starting at exactly 7 p.m. All of council is present, along with AMRAM, our finance, and our CEO ask questions. We have one person in the audience, and this is going on till 8 p.m. I'll open up the screen here. If anybody wants to start off with a question, please put up your hand there, and we're able to answer that. Edward or Edwin? You got to unmute yourself, Edwin.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Mr. Mayor, I've got a short address here, maybe 3 minutes and 3.5 minutes, and this is in consultation to the 2025 budget. And so I'd like to proceed, first of all, by thanking you and council so that I can be heard. I am Edwin Giesbrecht, resident and taxpayer. The proposed 80 million plus borrowing plan raises serious concerns.
You got to unmute yourself, Edwin. You must have pressed the button.
Oh, I did not. Maybe somebody else pressed it for me. I will start again. The proposed 80 million plus borrowing plan raises serious concerns about its financial feasibility. If you think $20 million will cover stage 1 of the recreation center, you're out of touch. It will likely need 30 million. Why not shift focus to a more practical initiative, like expanding the children's outdoor hockey ice rink for 1.7 million with a 1.2 million funding gap? This project makes more sense, especially when factoring in the maintenance and upkeep costs of a large-scale facility. Although you, Mr. Mayor, believe in federal and provincial handouts, these too can and would dry up in a full-blown trade war with the USA, and your faith in administrations likely will send you into a heart arrhythmia. As we face,
That's enough.
as we face economic uncertainty, rising inflation, and trade disruptions, relying on federal and provincial handouts is risky. We can't gamble with our community's financial future. Let's prioritize sensible, fiscal, responsible projects. With 1.6 billion in municipal income and 16,000 residents, we must strike a balance between fiscal responsibility and fair economic practices. In simple economic terms, excessive borrowing leads to overextension and budget instability, risks we cannot afford to take. I propose an immediate reduction as much as 70% in your borrowing plan, focusing only on necessary projects as we look ahead to the 2025 budget. I suggest 1, a 3% low to 11% high variable reduction in property taxes to ease tax burden while ensuring essential services are quantified by an equalizing balanced medium undertaking. This to assist existing residents for what is to come: higher living costs, possible job losses, with many unforeseen. 2, I further suggest for budget 2025 that the RM revert to what was a 3-year grace period if hard times should place a resident into tax arrears, where you now have 1 year. 3, reprioritizing spending to focus only on absolutely necessary community-driven projects adopted by staged advancements. 4. Limiting borrowing to critical needs with a dedicated rainy day fund for unforeseen circumstances. 5. Equitable tax distribution based on beneficial fairness for all residents. Mayor Therian, it is time to put our money where your mouth was. You campaigned on fiscal responsibility and the idea of running this municipality like a household budget, spending within our means, as you will recall in Lingcrest Community Club. This principle of fiscal prudence should guide all decisions, avoiding unnecessary debt and securing Springfield's financial future. If this consultation is truly about listening to residents, then it is time for the council to prove it by taking bold, sensible actions that reflects the priorities of those who actually fund this municipality. Mr. Mayor, I truly thank you for this opportunity to input for consultation to the 2025 budget. Thank you again, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Giesbrecht. Any questions for Mr. Giesbrecht, Council? I see none. Thank you. Any other questions there? See none. Pat, you got a question? Okay. Any other questions from the people in the on the monitor? Janet?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
I guess I'd like to apologize. I guess I misread and I sent you all an email because I tried to log in at 6 o'clock and that was wrong of me. I guess a couple of comments and then I'd have some questions. I guess I was expecting tonight to have a bit of a presentation to get a feeling for how council was going to be proceeding with 2025's budget. Like, we don't know what your plan is. We can look at what you proposed in your last year's budget for 2025. But other than that, we know that you're looking at borrowing for the rec center. We don't know anything else. So it's pretty hard to comment other than to give you some general, I guess even this meeting tonight, I was quite disappointed. It's a very friendly invitation that you've extended, but I never got an email blast. You give an email blast when you close the garbage dump or you go close the offices. Like, how are you trying to engage the public? If you really are sincere about wanting public feedback, I think you can do a bit of a better job than what was done for tonight. There was a small ad in the Clipper 2 Clippers ago, but it wasn't in your newsletter that you send out, like that little newsletter box that you have. So anyway, those are just my little bits of gripes. But getting back to tonight, the financial plan, the past practice has been for councils to look at the prior year's revenues and expenses as they were budgeted. And actually those amounts will be put into your 2025 budget in the first 2 columns. So if they don't closely match what you budgeted for in 2024, I suggest that you drill down and you ask why. Like, what happened? Like, why did you budget it? And there can be legitimate reasons for them not matching. Say salaries, somebody left and the position was vacant, so you have extra money. But anytime that it exceeds $100,000 or gets close to that, you should be looking at line to line to see why. And maybe you can cut back or reduce it or whatever. But what seems to be happening is we're always adding more to your budget amounts. I also have concern that you haven't got current information. You've got November 30th, 2024 financial statement as of November 30th. The operating surplus at that time shows $5 million. Expenditures at that time are below by $10 million, and your other revenues are below by $4.5 million. So I get it that there's going to be expenses happening in December that haven't been recorded. There's going to be journal entries that you're going to do back and forth. But your capital expenditures are below budget by $8 million again. This seems to be a repeated history that there's a lot of things being budgeted for that don't occur. But what you don't realize is that you're taxing the people for a great portion of that, and then you're going to put it into next year's budget. Now, sometimes I know you put it into a reserve fund and it'll fall, go forward, but it's just not a practical way of facing things at this time, because we know times are going to be very, very different. So I guess I just went off my notes, so I kind of went rambling a bit. But I do remind you that in 2022 and in 2023, the auditor report turned up significant deficits. So something's going wrong in your reporting system or your tracking system, how these things are occurring. And so I don't remember a time before where Springfield ever had a deficit, and you've been using your surplus funds, which I don't have a problem with it, except it should be a planned way to use them, not a carryover. I think what happened with those two things was specifically related to the Springfield Road project, where council never borrowed the money that they were supposed to do in 2022. So I don't know who's keeping an eye on things, but if you go to the extent to put in place a borrowing bylaw and you don't do it, and it causes successive deficits for years, it's taxing the wrong people, right? It's taxing the ones that have lived here for a while instead of the ones that are going to benefit for it in the future. The public has been accused by members of council and staff as spreading some misinformation regarding the borrowing for a number of capital projects. So I'm going to be careful how to frame this next point. In the 2024 capital budget, it shows in part 3 borrowing in excess of $50 million. Those are your numbers. On the storyboards for the pre-open house for the recreation facility first phase, it states that borrowing of $11,901,442, the annual debenture debt based on a property value at $350,000 would see an additional tax of $71.51. This would be on your tax bill for 20 years. I'm not sure why you base it on a property value of $350,000. I think that's very low ball in Springfield right now. If you look at the sales and stuff that are going on, I think things seem to be much higher. But I'll use those same examples, the same amount of interest in years. And if you borrow the $50 million that you proposed last year you were going to borrow, it would be 4.2 times that amount, or $300 additional on a tax bill. So let me rephrase that. If your property assessment is $350,000, to borrow the $50,000 or $50 million you proposed last year you were going to borrow, it will cost a taxpayer $300 more on their tax bill. Our taxes are going up on operating costs alone. So if you put this additional burden onto people, I don't know if you understand how that burden is going to be carried by a lot of people here, and that's not looking at farms that are a lot more valuable than $350,000, businesses that are not, like, you have to take a picture of something that's more realistic. Even look at what it would be on your own properties and see how you would handle those kind of debts. And then I guess there isn't a question. I guess this just is all comments right now, because now we know with what's happening with the US and things, inflation is going to be happening. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm boring you. I can see the top of your head, Maritarian, staring into space there. I don't know if I'm boring you. I guess maybe. As our elected representatives, I think you're going to have to tighten the purse strings. I think you're going to have to get your erasers out. I think you're going to have to try and cut back where you can. I think we have to take the frills out of our living. I know I'm looking at doing that personally. We're all going to be facing hard times for the next few years, and I hope council is serious or takes a serious look at this budget. Now, I am disappointed that I didn't get a glance at what you were proposing before talking about this. So maybe you already are, and that might be a good thing. But if you're not, it's going to be tough times. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Ms. Nyland, for your comments this evening. I'm by trade a fiscal conservative, and so knowing the uncertainties that are not only in Canada, but in North America and globally, I think we have to look at a restraint. We have to look at priorities. We have to look at many things, not only you, but Mr. Giesbrecht has said earlier. But I wanted to follow up to what you said, because, and I'll have a question in here in a second, but I actually want some clarity, because I think I'm trying to put myself in the context of sitting in the gallery as a public citizen, a resident. And I also agree that perhaps what we should have done, and I think we did do it last year, is present the budget numbers to the public and say to them, look, this is kind of what we're proposing. So I guess my question to the CEO or the financial officer is that what we're going to do next? Is we're going to hear the comments of the residents and people, and then put together a draft budget so they can also comment on that? So have a first eye on that.
Yeah, so this isn't the first time we've had these community consultations. We have never presented a budget at these. This is strictly to hear from the public, so we've never presented numbers. I feel like a lot of Ms. Nyland's comments are better maybe addressed meeting with AMRAM in the office, not possibly here with council. So no, we haven't done a presentation before. As Ms. Nyland mentioned, 2024 numbers, we had a January month end goal to get all of our 2024 invoices in. Then we do the journal entries. So it was just last week we were reviewing the final 2024 numbers, preparing to bring that to council. So that's soon. The deficit, it's not the first time we've had this based on the timing of the Springfield Road borrowing bylaw and project. This is the third year we've had to request minister's approval for that deficit. And yeah, until you see kind of the draft 2025, I don't think we're seeing huge increases so far from the budget numbers we're seeing. So
thank you for that response. And what I would like to say is, yes, it's very critically important for the public to know what draft budget we'll have, and as you say, it's in the works. But noting that, yeah, it's kind of shooting in the dark. I think we want to hear what the priorities are of the public. But just like so many people who aren't in these chairs tonight, they have kids, they have other priorities and other things. It's not that they're not interested. I think it's just, you know, there's so many things happening. They entrust us. And I'm not sure that your recommendation that Ms. Nyland or any other citizen meet with Amran is a practical thing, because of course a lot of people have day jobs, and it just would probably burden him in his capacity as well to take on that with residents. That's why we're here tonight. But following up on what Ms. Nyland said, I'm somewhat concerned as well, because I don't know too many properties in my ward that are $350,000. In fact, if there are, please let me know, because I'd be very interested to have one of my kids look at it, because that doesn't generally exist in Ward 3, Cokes Creek, Pine Ridge, or even Hazel Ridge. So why don't we use a more realistic number, which we've heard from certain developers who have come here, that realistic number is something like 524,000, give or take. So if we put a taxation rate of $525,000 on it, that tax implication is greater. So we don't want to misrepresent the facts. So are we guilty then of lowballing and saying to the public, well, you know what, the house at 350 is 7151. That could give the wrong perception. In fact, people would say, oh, well, $71 doesn't sound too much, not knowing that their property was 600,000, and so that could be doubled. But going a little step further, is there truth? Is there truth in what Ms. Nyland is saying, that if we borrow to the full capacity, that 7150 is just based on $11 million? So in 2025, how much are residents in our municipality going to be taxed if their residences are $524,000 assessed? I think that's what people want to know, is how much is this budget in 2025 going to cost me? If it's $300, I'm sure we could pack this chamber, because there'll be a lot of people who are not very thrilled, and actually in these times could actually say it's time to look at a different council who will put restraint, make cutbacks, and a whole host of things. Because you know what? When I talk to people on the street, they're having a hard time buying a bag of oranges at Costco. They're having a hard time feeding their family. And these are two family income residents. So we have to put a lot of concentration on the families that, you know, the Enola Food Bank, and the public should know, our council is going to tour the Enola Food Bank, I think next week Friday, if I'm right. This shouldn't be the case. There shouldn't be anybody in our municipality that needs to rely on a food bank, and yet we do. And so this is just going to cause another $300 or more that people are going to have to put out of their pocket for government services. And so we have to do our diligence. And again, I'm not conservative in a lot of things, but I'm an absolute fiscal conservative, because I know how my wife and I run our household, and we do what is needed and sometimes what's wanted, but we need to look at the needs versus the wants. And I would love to have the biggest rec center in the entire province, or even the entire country, but we yet don't have federal funds. We may not have the ability to debt service it if we're looking on the backs of our taxpayers and our residents. So Ms. Nyland, my question then directed to you is, how do you feel as a person who's older than 40 years old feel about taking on extra tax burden if it would be something like $300 a year?
Well, thank you for being generous about my age. I think my point was missed, and if I can kind of just clarify it. it's not that you don't borrow money. It's just when and how you borrow it. But if you are borrowing money, then you try and find some cost savings somewhere else. Like you can't run your operating budget all the time and increasing it and then not spending it. And that's what I see in your statement. And contrary to what the CAO just said, I don't need to ask AMRAM about those things. I can read a statement. I've done it for years, right? Like I know what's happening. And so you're budgeting for things that aren't being done or aren't being spent, but we're paying the taxes. Then the next year you're adding to them, and we don't ever kind of pare it back. So if you want to borrow money, if you want to add $300 for a rec center on our taxes, save us somewhere else in your operating budget. Because you're right, you know, I'm a senior citizen, I'm on a fixed income. I'm lucky that I probably can afford to stay here, but I know many others who are struggling and might not. Now, if that happens, then you have also the other thing that a lot of properties come up for sale. And when that happens, our assessment starts, like the values drop and our assessment drops. And then we end up, those that stay here have to pay more money. So there's a big picture to what's going on. I don't know if that answered your question, Councillor Miller.
Yeah, that's certainly fair. And we know that in our municipality, we have a lot of people who are seniors and on fixed income, and in fact, may even be single income families, right? So we have to, you know, most of us at this table, if not all of us, have dual income, have good, healthy incomes. And so I don't want to be out of touch with reality of how many people in our community, many people are struggling. My neighbor is a senior who is a widower and things like that. So, you know, we have to be realistic. The $300 in his pocket, coming out of his pocket, it doesn't sound maybe like a lot of money, but in fact, it's going to be the difference between him doing something and not, right? So the $300 for me, personally, I'll have to be blunt. It's not going to make a lot of difference because I have multiple incomes, but for the average Joe, I think it is. And I have to be sensitive to that and empathetic to that and respond to that because that's who I'm trying to represent. It's not just myself. So thank you for your answer. But the $300, do you see us taking on a task to maybe cut the budget? Maybe there's not a lot of frivolous things in our budget. I would have to say that, but how would you see us restraining and cutting back? If we were to cut anything, what would we be cutting?
Like that's not my job. My job would be to say, look at your financial statements line by line, and if you budgeted excess and you didn't spend it, ask why. There might be a logical reason why it wasn't spent, that particular line item. Then you go to the next one and maybe you can cut back on that next line item. You don't need it this year or something, but we can't keep growing like just in our operating budget and increasing our taxes there and then taking on an additional capital borrowing. It's not the time. It's not the right time.
Hi, Janet. I just wanted to tell you that I'm very diligent in what I do with my budget. I know how to read budgets, and I express that thank you for your concerns. Will say this though, is that this community has been looking for a rec center for over 30 years, as you're aware. And I believe that this council is being very due diligent in saying that we're only going to build phase one. We're not building the whole complex. And we're looking at our numbers to make sure we are thinking of the person that can't afford the oranges and that. But we also know that there is a need for mental health, to have things to do in the community. And bringing a rec center to me is a very important part, because what it does is allow the elderly and the young to get out and be active, which we know if we're not active, we kind of deteriorate ourselves. So to me, this project is very important. And we are, in my opinion, being very due diligent. And I agree with you with the line by line. We can sit there and go through the budget, which I can tell you when we go over this in our meetings, I do take it home and do that because I run a business for over 40 years. I had to do the same with my business. So I respect everything you said, but I really believe that this community really wants this rec center. And you know, and I know, I've been on this council for 3 terms, and things are not getting cheaper. They're getting more expensive. You know, you buy a house 10, 20 years ago, it was this price. If you bought a house 10 years ago, it's this price. Today, it's again different. That's why we're talking about a $500,000 house in this area, right? So I don't disagree with that. I do believe, though, that, you know, again, if a resident really takes current concern on their budget and they look at their tax bill coming in or what we're stating, you can work those numbers. I guess, you know, yes, council should try to make it as plain as can be, but you can take those numbers and say, okay, my house is worth 500,000. It's $71 at 350. So now it's going to cost me, if I have $500,000 assessment, it's going to cost me $101, let's say. You can do those numbers. I would hope that 99% of the people can do that. Now, I do agree, maybe we need to make it simpler and more real. I have no problem with that at all, but thank you.
Can I speak to that? Like the $71, I'm responding, sir. The $71 is palatable, and that's how it came across to me. Because you, at the same time you're advertising this meeting, you're advertising the borrowing bylaw for the rec center. But that's not the only project you have on the books. You know that. I know that.
And you're right, and I will speak to that. Okay, so having said that, there's a water treatment plant. We know that the lagoons need to be done, but I can tell you that the water treatment plant, we know where our numbers started. We're being due diligence on that. We're getting more money each time. We know that a water services board gave us more money. So again, the numbers will keep coming down. And as this gets approved, the developers that come in, they're going to be paying their development fees, which will bring that number again down more. So hopefully by the time the water treatment plant is built, the numbers will come to a point where it's reasonable and we can do those projections and have those numbers even less than what we say we were borrowing. Now, the same thing with the rec center. We're looking at the same thing. As Councillor Miller said, we don't have a federal grant. Doesn't mean we can't stop looking for federal grants. We can lobby the government to try to get a federal grant between now and the time of building. So we're not stopping here. We're not stopping to look for money. We are looking at every which way we can to bring them lower debt. And believe you me, I'm one believer that yes, no debt is the best, but also to grow a business or a community, you have to take educated risk, not just risk, but educated risk. And that's how I look at it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Field, for responding. I appreciate
I
that.
want to make one statement.
I'll just address, I kind of lost touch with how many different questions here, but you made a comment about adding this to the Clipper. I don't know how much more we could have done. We've even started the meeting at 7 p.m. as opposed to 6 there. So we did our due diligence with regards to advertising it there, and with regards to our budget there, our accountant there, our chief financial officer there, is extremely well qualified there. So I'm not sure what you were referring to with regards to our accounting principles. He adheres to all the professional standards and so on. As for the rec center, I think Glenn, the deputy mayor there, said it quite eloquently. I actually checked off of what I was going to say, which is exactly what he had stated there. So everything that we've done so far in the last 3 months or so, we've gone through the budget line by line and have looked at it with our directors there. And We've been kept quite up to date on that. We get our monthly statements as well as yourself there. So everything is more than above board. And our water treatment plant, I think the example is 29 million. It's down to 8 million with those grants that we've had. It's pretty hard to operate an RM. I'm not sure if you're aware that $20 million is not always available to every RM, and every RM is got the same fiscal responsibilities there to manage an RM. Their costs are extremely prohibitive high in some cases there. Our rec center is 32 years in the making, and this is the furthest we've gone with regards to that. And I'm hopeful. I know our volunteers are listening tonight there, and they're doing a fantastic job. We actually have a burger and beer night on the 17th of February there. So everything that they do is towards the rec center. So this is a community initiative, and I hear nothing but good things from the public there, and I've been out in the public quite a bit, even with my illness there. I've been able to get out and get lots of phone calls, even this morning, talking about that. So I can't really add too much more than that, unless Amram, you had anything you wanted to add. Um, I'll leave it to you to end it off.
Can I comment back, please?
Yeah.
I did not disparage your financial manager, what his title is. I just said quite clearly that Springfield in 2022 and in 2023 had huge deficits. We've never had deficits before, so something has changed. One was 800,000 plus, and one was 900,000 plus. So what I think happened was council, and it's not his fault, council did not proceed with borrowing the money or having their administration borrow the money for that particular project. So
Okay,
what happened then is that it took it out of our surplus account instead of putting it into a borrowing for the future that it should have been. So that was my point. And then I forget the second one, but no, never mind. It's fine.
Amram?
Thank you, Mayor Pat. Speaking on that deficit issue, like Madam Nyland said, this is a project that had started a couple of years ago. And the good thing is the RM, our operating statement, could absorb that expenditure. Yes, there was a borrowing bylaw, and the amount that was to be borrowed had not yet been borrowed from the bank. So the deficit that we recovered for the year 2022, that amount is going back. So when we did the recovery, it's coming from accumulated surplus. We did not spend it. It's going back into accumulated surplus because we did not have to spend it. And the same thing is going to happen for the 2023 financial statement. So it's up to the RM, up to council as to what to do. Our operating statement absorb that expenditure. And that again is a testament to the fact that this municipality is in a position where it can absorb such a huge amount in its financial statement without negatively affecting the RM financially. So the recovery that came from this accumulated surplus is going back into accumulated surplus. The money is not used. And I want to speak to the property tax examples, which Councillor Glenn had also spoken about. Those are examples that we give. The example could be for $100,000 assessment, could be for 300,000, 500,000 assessment. So the mill rate that is calculated is on the example And a resident can take that mill rate and apply it to whatever assessment value. And for residential, we all know it's 45% of the assessed value that is subject to tax. So even if the property is, we take for a property that's 500,000, what we've calculated, so how do we arrive at the mill rate? We say, what would be the annual payment if we're to borrow X amount of dollars? Looking at what we're talking about for phase one, the 11.9 million. And then we looked at our assessment and calculate the mill rate from there and say, based on this assessment that we have, and this annual expenditure that we're going to be making, because the expenditure is a constant dollar value, this is what the mill rate would be for this borrowing. And then you can apply that to any assessed value you want to. So maybe we could do multiple examples of 100,000, 350,000, $500,000 homes. That is something we could do going forward. But the mill rate is on the example. So the resident can take the mill rate and apply it to the assessed value, 45% of whatever assessed value, to know what the impact will be. And then I want to speak to the operating statement. So the way I look at the financial plan, when we look at the capital side of the financial plan, there is usually two pages that really shows the capital projects, page 13 and page 14. So page 13 will show the current year capital projects that we will undertake. So we're talking about 2025 financial plan. Page 13 will show all those projects that are to be undertaken in 2025. And then page 14 shows the 5-year capital plan, which is council and management's plan 5 years into the future, and say, these are projects we're planning to undertake. The way I understand project page 14, it is not a final document. Those are management's best estimates of what it could cost the RM to undertake those projects. And some of those projects, even though they are shown on page 14, they are in their infancy stages where estimates are still being generated, grants are being applied for, and management is still trying to figure out how to fund those projects. So they are never final. What is on page 13 is what is final, but what is on page 14 is a plan. It's what management said, this is what we're planning to do, and we're still trying to work out the details. So I would advise residents not to latch on those numbers on page 14 and say, this is what the RM wants to do. They are going to borrow $50 million. It's a plan, 5 years into the future, and the details are still being worked out. It's not final. Those figures on page 14, they are not final. I don't see them that way. I don't see them as final figures. And then, yes, please.
I never even mentioned page 14. I was only speaking about page 13. And as it appeared on November 30th, there's an $8 million difference in your budgeted and your actual capital for 2024. And at the bottom of it, you're showing potential borrowing of $50 million. That's what I spoke on, only page 13.
Yes, so the projects that are shown on page 13, those are part of the projects that are on page 14. That amount is at the bottom of page.
No, one is in 2024. And on page 14, we're talking about the future 5 years, 25, 26, 27, 28. I didn't talk about those, and I agree with you. Those are kind of conceptual, right? They're not, unless they're part of a progressive project.
So there are 3 projects there. The regional wastewater treatment facility, which is the lagoon. Again, just to confirm that, so there was 22 million shown there on page 13, and that estimate has changed. because that project was not for 2024. And then there is the Springfield Recreation Center. The total amount, the estimate then is what was shown there. But what was to be spent in 2023 was just $3 million out of that. So the bulk of that amount was for future years. And then you have the Dugald Oakbank water treatment plant or water systems.
You said
which-
2023. Did you mean 2024?
Sorry, yeah, I'm talking about
Okay.
2024, which is what
Okay.
page 13 is about. And
Yes.
then page 14 is from 2025 and beyond.
Yeah.
On this financial plan that we're talking about. So I'm saying for the Springfield Recreation Center and the Regional Wastewater Treatment Facility, those two amounts to be borrowed, they were for future years. They are estimates.
No,
And even for the
they didn't.
DAOs,
They weren't for future years. They just didn't occur this year. That you didn't move on them as fast as you hoped. Would you agree with that?
we knew then that the rec center was not going to be fully built in 2024.
So
We
why
knew
was
we
it?
knew that.
Why did you have it in the 2024 capital plan?
There was just $3 million that was budgeted to be spent in 2024.
But you didn't spend it, so you did. Like I don't want to argue with you. I'm just trying to say that when council is looking at budgeting, is to try and do the best job that they can and look at the year that they're budgeting for and only tax us for what they need for that year. Don't tax us for something that you're not going to be able to accomplish in this year, because we're going to, like, then we get taxed again the next year. And you just kind of answered my question. If we had that surplus, that $800,000 surplus, and I think your words were, it was absorbed. You said it was absorbed. So
Yes, ma'am. And sorry,
we're being-
please.
No,
I
but we're,
think that saved resident, the taxpayers, the fact that the RM absorbed that expenditure, it saved the taxpayers money, because even though there was a borrowing bylaw, if the RM borrows for it, then you know that the RM has to pay a cost for that capital. But for the RM to be in a capacity where it can absorb the cost, and if the RM does not eventually borrow for it, then it has saved taxpayers some money.
where did the money come from? Taxpayers.
Yes, again, let me speak to that. Most of our capital projects are funded by reserves and grants. Most of them, when we look at page 13, we will see the bulk of our capital projects are funded through reserves and grants.
800,000 was from taxation, but okay. I think you get my point, is that the
I will
purpose
look
of,
at it. I will look at it that the RM saved residents on taxes on that project.
no, you saved us future taxes. You paid for it from our savings account, from our previous taxes. That's where the money came from. You absorbed it.
Because there was already a borrowing bylaw that was approved, meaning that the RM already had the.
That's immaterial because you didn't borrow the money. I'm sorry.
Okay, ma'am.
Glenn just has a question here. Or a comment.
Janet, I'll step in here for a bit because I kind of see where you're coming from. So I agree with you and I'm sorry, Anna, I have to admit that I do agree with Janet on a piece of this. So if it's in our capital budget, we're looking at spending that money that year, correct?
Yes.
Because it's in that year. So we didn't spend the money because it's still sitting there, correct? Now, in the actual budget, though, we're saying we're going to spend it in that year. So I totally agree with you that it's in the budget to spend it that year, but we just didn't. We didn't build the rec center, right?
Right.
So now that's going to be deferred into the next capital year because we didn't spend it and we haven't built it yet. Would agree?
On that project, yes.
Yes, and I'm only specifically talking to that project because I heard the comment that, we saved the RM money. Well, technically we did and we didn't because we're still planning to spend the money. We just haven't spent it as soon as we thought we would have. Agree?
Yes.
Yeah, that's my point.
So my point there was that project, residents were not taxed for it, sir. So residents were not taxed for it because it was going to be funded from reserve. And so if we do not spend on the project, the money will still remain in the reserve
next year,
until when we want to
how
spend
many
for
times
it.
they
So,
said for rec and they tax and then they spend it.
so my point I was making was that most of our capital projects are funded through reserves, meaning that residents are not taxed. They are mostly not taxed for these capital projects. They are taxed mostly for our operating expenditures. And even our operating expenditures, there are grants also that we obtain to fund our operating expenditures. So if we're undertaking a capital project and we're funding it through reserve, as in this case, the $3 million was to come from the Springfield Community Center reserve. If we don't undertake the project, the money stays in the reserve. The resident was not taxed for it. And so this is the case that I'm making. For the Springfield Road reconstruction, it was different because there was grants for the project. There was a huge grant for the project. And then it was to be funded partly also by borrowing. And so what was provided for in the borrowing bylaw, that amount, the borrowing had not been undertaken, but the project was undertaken. So the amount that was to be covered by borrowing was what was absorbed in the operating statement. So that was why I'm saying I look at it that if we do not borrow for it, and then we were able to absorb it, we had saved ourselves some amount of cost, which is interest cost.
For sure.
So people can look at things differently, but for me, that's how I perceive it. That's how I look at it. And I'm saying, since I've been here, our capital projects are mostly funded through reserves. On that financial plan, the only amount that residents were taxed for on page 13 was about $300 and something thousand for all the capital projects on page 13. It was just about $300 and something thousand. None of the huge project items resulted in taxes to our residents.
Can you tell me, please, then, where do you think the money from reserves comes from? Is there not an annual taxation contribution on page 5 into a number of reserves? Is that not taxes?
Yes, ma'am, from
there's
previous
other
years.
contributions from developers. I realize that, but we are taxed regularly for contributing to reserves. So it is tax dollars.
Yes, from previous years, and like you mentioned, from developer contributions. But when we're looking at the current year and future years and how we're funding the projects, especially the huge capital items, based on my experience here, they are funded mostly by grants and reserves.
I'll just maybe add those reserves are also contributed to by the developer levies that we collect as well.
Yes.
So it's not all strictly from taxpayers. It's
I said that.
just confirming.
Okay. Any other questions? Andy?
Thank you. I'm going to propose probably in near future that we have reports from all the departments in our community, from our administration, but we don't have our finance reports on monthly basis, and I think we should have it. So we know how we budgeted, how much money we have in reserves, how much money we tax people, and how much we're spending, and we should know that on monthly basis so we don't have blow-ups or, you know, something it's out of whack. So it should go to the public and should be done to the so the residents know how we're spending the money. Thank you.
Well, don't we get the monthly, we get monthly reports already?
So
Yes.
council does receive the
Yeah.
monthly financial, and that's something management, we review monthly each department, and we go line by line and we look at, are we spending what we should be spending? Are we spent to this part of the year when we expected? We do that review every month. That's part of management's role, not council to sit down and do line by line review. That's something Amram and I do. And even for budget, I know senior management kind of dread the line by line review I do with them before it even comes to council. And we do it line by line. And if, you know, you're not spending that budget, we look at it and we change those numbers. So that is being done.
I'm not disputing that, and I don't want to see line by line be done by council, but I said that we should have monthly report presented to the public and council.
Yeah, and that's
Thank
our
you.
monthly financial statement. So that is being done.
Mayor Pat, I
Yeah,
want to clarify one thing on budgets.
yeah. Just one moment then, Amram. Yeah, because we get those monthly reports already, and that's open to the public. It's a concise report, easily read by myself. I talk to myself there, and everybody on council here is self-employed there, so they understand it. It takes me a little longer, so I ask Amram questions, and over the years I get a better insight. Go ahead, Amram.
Yes, sir. So I wanted to clarify also something. Again, my perspective, the way I understand, I have been trained, and the way I look at a budget serves many different purposes, but one of them is that the budget is a planning tool. It helps you to plan, and then when you have the plan, that plan serves as a guide. So you execute the plan, and then you will obtain results, which becomes your actual. From my experience and my training, I have hardly seen where a budget has to be the same as your actual, because there are many things that go on, many transactions that go on that are beyond management control. For example, even when you're talking about the prices of commodities. But the budget is there as a plan, a guide. It can be a target. On the revenue side, you want to make sure that when you budget your revenues, that they come over. The revenues are more than what you budgeted for. On the expenditure side, you want to make sure that the expenditures are below your budget. Expenditure control mechanisms are put in place. And so if at the end of the period, you have that picture where your revenues are more than what you budgeted for and your expenditures are less than what you budgeted for, you are in a very good position. You have a surplus. You will rather want to be in a surplus than to be in a situation where you're in a deficit. So that's the way I look at it. And the November financial statement that we presented, there was a surplus there. Now, talking about the audited financial statement, we have to also note there are public sector accounting standard entries that we put into the financial statements that are not physical cash entries. They are not cash transactions. They are accounting estimates. And these also sometimes, I will say like in 2022 and in 2023 that we reported deficit on the audited financial statement, these also would have contributed to that because we don't budget for these estimates, but we charge them into the financial statement. And I'll give you an example. Like we have in 2024 now, we've leased graders and excavators. By the time I am done with year-end entries, there are going to be estimates that I'm going to charge into the operating statement because of those leases. And so they may, for example, say cause a deficit, but it's an accounting deficit. It's not a cash deficit. This is different though from the Springfield Road reconstruction project that we're talking about. But I'm just trying to explain that on the one hand, when we look at our budget, our financial plan, if we come up at the end of the period with a surplus, I think it's good for us. On the audited financial statement, it may be different a little bit because there are accounting entries that goes on in there that are estimates that are not necessarily cash flow expenditures that may cause, but we will watch out for these and make sure that they don't throw the financial statement into deficits, which they did not in the previous years. It was Springfield Road reconstruction. Yes.
Did you, Amram, with this postal strike there, are we getting our bills a little bit later because of the postal strike, or is everything electronic there? We're up to date now, though.
We've gotten most of our bills, and we're at a point where we're confident that 95% of orders that were placed in 2024 that were to be accrued for have been accrued for, and that we will make a decision where we look at what is the estimate of what is outstanding and what the aggregate of that might be, all the invoices that we think may be outstanding, because we also don't want it to be material enough when the auditor is auditing our financial statement. If we have too many invoices outstanding that are high value items and they are material enough, it may affect the auditor's opinion on the financial statement. So we're still processing the bills, but the bulk of them have come in.
Thank you very much, Amram. I see it's 8 o'clock here. I don't see anybody else's hand up here. Any questions from council for you want to come up here, Pat? Yeah.
Pat Burbank, Sunnyside. It just triggered in my head about outstanding payments. I just want to know if the check to the WMR was recovered. Because Colleen, you said in that meeting, I hope it didn't go out in the mail. So I just wonder if you were able to stop payment.
That payment has not been processed, so.
Okay, that's all I want to know. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you. Unless there's any questions from council, and I see none. I don't see any questions in the audience, just Pat and nothing in the screen here. I'm prepared to close the meeting. Thank you very much for everybody's participation there, and have a good night.